Hi, guys, and welcome back to another day of listening and learning with Miss Catrone from Citizenship Academy. I'm actually super excited to start a new domain with you guys today, and it's going to be a switch from our domain about immigration, and we're going to be talking all about people who have been fighting for a cause. So I know that many of you guys, if you've seen on TV or maybe even in your neighborhoods, lately that you have seen maybe people protesting with signs and marches for fighting for things that they believe in. And we're actually going to take a turn, we're going to go back in history and we're going to learn about a bunch of people who have done this before. We're also going to learn about why it is so important to stand up and fight for what you believe in. So I'm really excited. Every day I'm going to teach you about a new person in history who has changed our world by fighting for what they believe in. Now, right now I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some people that we're going to go over. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to talk about who we're going to be talking about in this domain. Then each day we're going to dive in a little bit more and talk about each individual person. So let's get started right away. And I'm going to start all the way down a little bit. Okay, so here we have a picture of a woman, and her name is Susan B. Anthony. And this is a picture of Susan B. Anthony, and she is a woman who fought to end slavery. That was the first thing she fought for. And then she also fought to get women the right to vote. So a long, long time ago, men and women were not treated equally. And she worked really hard to fight for women to get the right to vote. So we're going to be learning about how she fought for a cause that she believed in. Who else do we have here? Okay. Next up, we have a woman, and her name is Eleanor Roosevelt. And she was one of our first ladies, and she fought for all people to have a better life with a good education and a good job. So these things were not, it was not going well the way things were. And so we're going to learn about how she fought to change things. Next up, we have another woman, and her name is Mary McLeod Bethune. I'm gonna guess that's how you say it. And she helped to get better educational opportunities for people. She worked alongside with Eleanor Roosevelt, who we just saw, and several US presidents to improve people's lives. So she didn't like the way that people's lives were going. She didn't think they were being treated fairly. And so she fought to change that. So this is an awesome person that we're gonna be learning about. Next up, I hope some of you guys recognize this man, because I know in February, a lot of us did projects on him for Black History Month. And this is Jackie Robinson. And he worked to make it possible for African Americans to play professional sports. So he kind of paved the way, and he fought to make a change. And remember, we're learning all about people who have fought to make a change. Next up, again, I hope this person looks familiar to you based on all the projects that we did. Here we have Rosa Parks. And she is actually known as the mother of civil rights. And she helped to make life fairer and better for African Americans living in the South in the 1950s and 60s. So she, again, is another person who fought for a change. I hope this man is also familiar to you guys, and I hope that I know we've learned a little bit about him in the past every year as we celebrate his birthday. So here we have Martin Luther King Jr., and he did a ton of things to make life better for all Americans. I know that you guys have you hopefully recognize his name and know a little bit about him. And we set aside a day every year to celebrate his birthday and to honor all the things that he did to fight for equality of all people. That just means that people are treated equally and fairly. All right, next up we have a man. Maybe you have seen him, maybe you haven't. His name is Cesar Chavez, I think is how you're going to say that. And he actually fought to get workers treated the same. So he saw that some workers were being treated very badly and did not receive this fair amount of money for the work that they did. And he helped organize people to change this situation. So that's kind of an overview of some people that we're going to be learning about. But I'm going to pop back up to the top, and we're going to get started with our lesson for today. There we go. Alrighty, I want to zoom this in for you guys. So let me fix this. There we go. That is too much. Alrighty, without further ado, let's learn about a bunch of people who have fought to make a cause and why this is so important. So as you guys are listening today, I want you to listen carefully for the reasons the author gives for this statement that the people in this domain made the world a much fairer place. So that's what we're listening for. What reasons does the author give in telling that all of these people made the world a fairer place? Alrighty. These are just a group of people asking to be heard. Again, this is super timely, and because this is happening in history today. Like I said, if you maybe look on TV or in your own neighborhoods, you might see a group of people that look similar to this. Throughout history, people have had to stand up and demand that they be treated fairly. They have fought for equal rights for themselves and for others. So when I say the word rights, rights are things that a person should have. Equal rights are those rights that everybody should have. We should all have the same equal rights and things that we should all have. You have to be very brave to stand up for what you believe in. Over the next couple of weeks, you will find out about 7 people who took a stand against inequality and demanded certain rights. The word inequality means that different people or different people groups are not treated the same. So one of the groups is not being treated fairly. So things aren't equal and fair because different groups are getting different treatment. You will discover that most of these people lived a long time ago, but what they achieve affects us today. They made the world a much fairer place. They fought for equal rights for everyone. Alrighty. So here we have what looks like people being able to vote. One of the types or categories of rights that people have is called civil rights. Civil rights are those rights that the government gives to people. Civil rights in the United States include freedom of speech and the right to vote, and protection from discrimination. Discrimination is a big word, and all it means is that someone is treated unfairly because of things like their religion or the color of their skin. Civil rights also include the right to be treated equally under the law. Different countries have different ideas about civil rights, but the people in this domain all lived in the United States, so you will learn about the struggle for civil rights in this country. There is another category of rights that you will hear about called human rights. Human rights are those believed to belong to all people, simply because we are people. You will hear about people in this domain who fought for human rights. Many of the people in the stories that follow had to fight for some of the rights that we now take for granted. To take something for granted means to not think about something and just assume that you've always had it. However, these people didn't fight with violence. They fought with words and with peaceful actions. As a result, they changed the world for the better. All right, so here we have a picture of a king, and we call these monarchs. We're going to learn a little bit more about that now. For a very long time, people weren't protected by any rights at all. For hundreds, even thousands of years, people were at the mercy of those in charge. To be at someone's mercy means that you don't have any power over them and you have to do what they say. Monarchs, such as kings, military leaders, or tribal leaders, governed with an iron fist. Okay, so that saying, if someone governs with an iron fist, do you think that they are kind and gentle, or that they are very, very strong and strict? What do you think that means to rule with an iron fist? Yeah, it means that they were very strict and strong in the way that they ruled, that they weren't kind and fair about it. Over time, people began to demand some rights. They wanted to select their leaders, they wanted to vote, they wanted to own property, and they wanted to worship freely. Eventually, monarchs changed their ways, or they were replaced by elected governments. Gradually, governments, including the US government, started granting people civil rights, which meant that people would be treated fairly. Sadly, when governments do not guarantee rights, people face great difficulties. Often the most basic human needs, such as enough food to eat, a safe place to live, and a good education and job, are denied. We should never forget how lucky we are to live in a country that cares about people and their rights. However, in the United States, the government and some more powerful groups of people have not always treated everyone fairly and equally. Alrighty, so here we have a group of people and they have signs and they're marching for women's rights. For a very long time, in many parts of the world, women did not have the right to vote. In the United States, it wasn't until the 1920s that all women were granted or given the right to vote. This change to the law happened after women protested, marched, and campaigned for this right. So to protest means to show you're upset with something. To campaign means that you take part in activities that are intended to change people's minds or convince them of something. So these women are protesting. In Syracuse right now, we're having protests as well. So we're letting people know that we don't agree with what's going on. Alrighty, here we have civil rights protests. Until the mid-1860s, in parts of the United States, many African Americans were enslaved. What does it mean to be enslaved? Enslaved people are forced to work with no money, and they are not free to make their own choices about their lives. Even after slavery was abolished or ended, in some states, African Americans did not have the same legal rights as white people and were not treated equally. In the South, for example, African Americans were not allowed to attend certain schools or eat at certain restaurants. Barriers were also placed in their way when African Americans tried to vote. In this domain, you will learn about two people who helped to defeat or end this inequality. Remember, inequality means when people groups are not treated the same and one group is not treated fairly. With their supporters, they marched, campaigned, and demanded equal rights under the law until finally in 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. This act removed unfair laws by prohibiting or ending discrimination. What does discrimination mean? It means that people are treated differently because maybe of their color of their skin or their religion that they practice. The following year, the Voting Rights Act removed all voting barriers for African Americans. This meant that African Americans would be allowed to vote just like all Americans without facing discrimination. Remember, discrimination is if a group of people is being treated differently because of the color of their skin or the religion that they practice. Alrighty, here we have a picture of the Declaration of Independence. Throughout the history of this country, there have been certain people dedicated to making sure that all citizens have the civil rights they deserve. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers, wrote the words, "All men are created equal." A founding father is one of the men who helped form our government over 200 years ago. So they kind of shaped what our laws would be and what our rules would be here. He wrote those words a very long time ago in a document called the Declaration of Independence. This document was a letter of protest against the unfair treatment of the colonists by the British. What does protest mean again? It means that you're letting people know that you don't agree with the way that things are happening. The colonists fought for their rights and freedom and found a new nation, the United States of America. In this domain, you will find out about 7 individuals who, like Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers, stood up for what they believed in. Here's a quick introduction and a summary of the achievement to which each is known. All right, so we kind of reviewed this in the beginning, but we're going to touch on it once more. So here's Susan B. Anthony, and she thought that women should have the same education and employment as men. This means that she fought for girls and women to be able to go to school and get the kind of jobs that boys and men could get. Susan believed that women should be able to vote. She dedicated her whole life to making the world a fairer place for women. All right, here, if you remember, we have Eleanor Roosevelt. She worked to improve the quality of life for many groups of people, but especially for children and women, Native Americans and African Americans. She was concerned about the fact that girls did not have the same educational opportunities as boys, and that far too many African Americans lived in poverty. She traveled all over the United States and talked to the poor and needy. She encouraged her husband, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to make changes that would reduce poverty and let everyone live a better life. All right, here we have Mary McLeod Bethune. And she worked to create educational opportunities for African American girls during the time when there were separate schools for children of different skin color. She started a school in Florida that later became a college. Some people in her community did not like what she was doing and tried to stop her. They bullied her, but she would not give up. Eventually, Mary became so successful that several US presidents sought her advice on how to make the country a fairer place for all. I love how much bravery she showed and perseverance. Even when she was being bullied, she didn't give up. Alrighty, here we have Jackie Robinson, and he was a bright, well-educated, and terrific athlete. He became the first African American to play Major League Baseball. When Jackie first began playing Major League Baseball, some of his fellow team members and fans treated him badly. Jackie Robinson did not give up. Love that perseverance. Because of his courage and talent, he changed people's attitudes or their views about things. Courage is bravery someone shows when facing dangerous or difficult times. So I love his character strengths, bravery and perseverance. All right, next up we have Rosa Parks. On a cold December evening many years ago, an African-American woman named Rosa Parks sat on a crowded bus. When the bus driver asked her to give up her seat to a white man who did not have a seat, she refused. She found the courage to say no. After Rosa was arrested, people came together and decided that they would not ride the Montgomery city buses until everyone had the same rights as white people. How does this image help you understand what the text says about Rosa Parks? I think that the image really helps us because we can see the scene in which the story takes place. So we see that white people are sitting towards the front, and so is she, and then when they ask her to move, she refuses. So it really sets the stage for us. Alrighty, back to our story. Alrighty, this was the beginning of the civil rights movement that challenged unfair laws in the South. The civil rights movement is a series of events that involved people fighting for equal rights for all people. Next up, we have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is perhaps the most famous member of the civil rights movement. He believed in bringing about change through nonviolence. Nonviolence is a refusal to take physical action against someone who is treating people badly or unfairly. In 1965, nearly 1/2 of African Americans lived in poverty, and many experienced discrimination every day. Because of Martin's leadership, the civil rights movement forced change and helped to create opportunities for many people who had experienced discrimination. It became against the law to discriminate against someone because of race, color, religion, or the country in which they were born. All right, here we have Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez knew firsthand how hard it was to be a farm worker who had to travel from farm to farm. He knew that farm workers did this type of work and they earned very little money for the hard work that they did. In the year 1962, Cesar and his friend organized thousands of farm workers into a group called a union. Because so many people came together as part of this union and demanded change, Cesar found a way to improve the lives of all farm workers. The people you will learn about had courage. Remember that courage means showing bravery in a time that is challenging. Sometimes they were bullied or threatened, but this did not stop them from doing what they knew was right. As you hear these stories, think about how different life was all those years ago when these people set out to make the world a better place. Alrighty, guys, I'm so excited to go on this journey with you as we learn about all these people and the differences that they made in our community. I hope that this, as we learn about these people, you start to understand how important it is to fight for a change, as all of these great members of history did. I'm really excited to go on this journey with you guys. I miss you terribly, and I hope that you are all well. See you next time for a new lesson.